This is the Water Quality Association podcast.
When you can increase those feed conversion rates by making the water quality much better or gain more pounds of milk, then obviously the farmer's more productive and making more money, and then they're happy.
That's WQA member Mike Heatwole talking about using water treatment for agriculture. And welcome to the podcast from the Water Quality Association, the leading voice of the residential, commercial, and industrial water treatment community. I'm Wes Bleed. Be sure to give us a thumbs up, comment, and subscribe to the podcast so you never miss a show. That's the value and the magic of podcasting, of course. And be sure to check out our podcasts on YouTube. In this episode of the WQA podcast, we talk with Mike Heatwole, Master Water Specialist and Regional Sales Manager for the Mid-Atlantic with Water-Right A.O. Smith Corporation. Mike is a past recipient of the WQA Regents Award for his significant contributions to water quality education and advocacy. In today's conversation, we'll take a look at how water treatment systems are used in agriculture, what challenges farms and ranches face with water quality, and how smart solutions can make a real difference. Plus, we'll have our WQA tip. It's all coming up on the Water Quality Association podcast. Well, Mike, so nice to have you on the program. We appreciate your joining us. And with this special topic ahead of Thanksgiving in the United States, water treatment for agriculture. It's not maybe a topic that a lot of people think about, but nevertheless, it's very important. And so we appreciate your joining us. So welcome.
Well, thank you, Wes. It's a pleasure to be here, and I appreciate the invitation. And yes, water treatment in agriculture has, throughout the course of my career, I believe, become even more important today than what it has been in the past. So I think it's very timely and appropriate to talk a little bit about this topic.
Well, tell us how you got started with agriculture clients and just the kind of the scope of the work you've done over the years.
So it helps to be born in an agriculture area. I'm from the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia, Rockingham County. We are the number one ag county in the state of Virginia. Born and raised on a dairy and poultry farm. So I grew up in agriculture, went through 4-H, FFA, all those things, got my American farmer degree, and, always thought I wanted to go into production agriculture. Tried it several times, and, life has a way of happening, and it just didn't work out. But I started out my career, working for a farm co-op after college, then selling farm equipment directly to farmers. And then I ended up getting in the plumbing industry through some friends. And through that, it's where I got involved in water treatment and water quality. And being heavily involved with the plumbing, we had so many dairy farms and poultry farms in our area. So we were supplying a lot of equipment to those folks. And then the issue, of course, water quality would come up, and, equipment would foul out just with the normal things that we think of, hardness, iron, those normal contaminants. So I started working with farmers and integrators in the industry, as well as equipment folks, to help come up with solutions so their equipment would work better. And then as we progressed, especially on the poultry side, I always thought it was kind of funny that the one item they monitor as a grower is the water intake of chickens and turkeys. And they know down to the 100 head how much water should be consumed by healthy birds. And so they chart that every day, and it's a nice little steady linear curve. And when the birds fall off of water consumption, they knew something was wrong. And they would always look at, air quality, feed quality, did they get a disease, something like that. Water was always the last thing they looked at. And yet next to feed, it was biggest component that went inside the animal. And so we started working with some integrators, some companies like Cargill and Purdue and some names that folks probably recognize, and trying to analyze, maybe it wasn't those other factors. Maybe water quality had a lot to do with it. And so working with them out in the trenches in the field helped to analyze problems and situations. I kind of developed a little reputation in the area. And so that's how I got into it. And then on the dairy side, water, for cows milking, an average dairy cow would drink 65, 70 gallons of water a day. And if they're not consuming water, they're not producing milk. And so, I got heavily involved in that. And then we even got into reproductive issues due to water quality. And it just kind of all grew from that. It's how over time it got bigger and bigger for us.
So let's go back. Was it the farmer that was discovering that the water quality might be suspect, or were you suggesting that there might be reason to take a look at the water for whatever the problems were that you were trying to uncover and then obviously solve?
Yeah, some of both. I had the opportunity to get in front of a lot of the farmers with our plumbing side of the business. And so I could start having those discussions, and, they would look at equipment, and then, I got to know people in the equipment business. And so it was kind of a combined thing. It was people were looking for answers, didn't always know where to go. And I would suggest, hey, maybe it is the water quality. And then, they'd go, hey, we haven't tried that. We've looked at everything else. And then as time went on, we developed our own state certified lab, so I could do a lot more extensive testing, put some of my theories to test. And, so we put some systems together for some farms and had some tremendous successes, especially on the poultry side. Farmer might send a flock to market, and back then it was anywhere from 9 to 12 weeks. Now it's 5 or 6 weeks that they send birds to market, and they could pay for the entire system and the gains of production in just one flock. And when they're turning, 10, 12 flocks a year, that was substantial money. In fact, there were many farms who were on the verge of going under because they couldn't produce enough revenue. And we were able to turn them around enough to where they became very profitable. So some really good success stories there.
I guess so. Maybe we should back up and ask about misconceptions of water and agriculture, and maybe even what you were dealing with as you talked a little bit about this, but, hey, maybe water's the problem. But yeah. What would you say that most people don't get related to water and feed and agriculture?
So I think the big misconception is, and I hate to say it from farmers, but, they're just dumb animals. The cows, they could go to the creek or go to the pond and they would drink. Why do we need to be concerned about giving them good quality water? And same way with the poultry. Hey, as long as they're drinking, why should we be concerned about that? And so I think it was a lack of understanding on their part, that just they didn't think it mattered. And not unlike the rest of the industry, it's like in the appliance world today, we say as appliances get to become more efficient, higher quality water is more important in them working correctly and functioning properly. Well, livestock and poultry, I found, is not unlike people. They want to and need the same quality of water that you or I would want to drink. And I've seen that proven. Given the choice, livestock will pick the cleaner water. in my previous career, we sold livestock fountains, and we always advocated good, clean water. And the farmers would go, "Oh, I don't know why I'm putting these in. They'll just go to the creek and drink." Well, when they put a water fountain in that guaranteed good, clean, fresh water, the livestock would walk. I've seen them walk a half a mile away from the creek to go to that clean water at the fountain. So they're not dumb critters that a lot of people think. They understand and can sense it and know that high quality water is good for them. And then we would see it in feed conversions, right? Which is the way the farmer measures gain. You know, you feed them, you want to fatten them up, get them to market. The goal is you sell more than you paid for. And so when you can increase those feed conversion rates by making the water quality much better or gain more pounds of milk, then obviously the farmer's more productive and making more money, and then they're happy.
Wow. So the metrics were really proving what you were doing was being effective.
Correct. And it was, in many cases, fairly substantial. When you could take, as I mentioned before, a poultry farm who, you know, is threatening to be cut off by a supplier because their performance is so bad, they find out they have a water quality issue. We're able to fix it, whether it was high iron or bacteria or nitrates or manganese in the water, correct that problem. And they go from the bottom. They're compared to other growers when they sell their flocks, and they would go from the bottom to the top, which was literally tens of thousands of dollars in a payoff over a pretty short term. So, I mean, some of those results were absolutely dramatic.
Now, have you dealt at all with irrigation, crop irrigation, and how does that differ at all from what you've been talking about up until now?
So, you know, out in the Midwest where we have the giant irrigation systems and stuff, you know, I think mainly they're generally concerned about sodium content in the water and building up too much salt in the soil and against the plants. In my area in the East, we have some of that, but not like they do in other parts of the country. But we have a lot of row crop. We have a lot of vegetable plots. That has been something that has grown over the years. These small farm to market, you know, having farmers, you know, with maybe 5 or 10 acres, and they're producing tomatoes or vegetables or lettuce or carrots or whatever. And they're selling locally, you know, fresh produce. That's where a lot of the market has shifted over the last number of years. And so they're very concerned about water quality to those plants. I just worked with Virginia Tech on a project recently, last year. They were analyzing the pH of the water, wondered why it was different inside their buildings versus what was happening in the soil outside with the crops. And obviously the outside crops were receiving rainfall that the inside crops weren't. And the well had very low pH. And so all the irrigated water inside the buildings were negatively affecting the plants as opposed to those who were grown outside with the natural rainfall, only supplemented by irrigation. So that was an interesting study to see how in the same area, how you can have such a different dynamic that's related to the type and the quality of the water that's going there. Another one that we found that was really interesting, that we did a study when farmers spray their crops. Okay, sprays and chemicals are very expensive. And obviously they want to minimize the cost, but they want to increase the production. So for killing weeds or, you know, getting undesirable elements out. I do a lot of work with Virginia Tech because they're right here in my home state. And they did a very involved study on how pH affects chemical reaction in the mix tank. And we found that some chemicals would lose up to 60-70% of their efficiency if we used the wrong pH of the water to mix the solution in the tank to spray on the crops. And that has huge detrimental effects, not only to the crops, but a waste of money and then putting more chemical in the environment than what anybody wanted to try to do the job. So as we develop and get more sophisticated with our farming, we continue to find that water quality has a bigger and bigger effect on our outcome.
Yeah, and the more I'm hearing you talk, Mike, I'm just thinking about, all of the organic farms, which I would imagine would be very interested in water treatment, and orchards growing fruit.
Oh, yes.
I would think they would be very interested as well. So this runs the gamut, doesn't it, as far as the applications that are possible?
Well, I was going to say the one I'm working on currently is a game farm, a wild game farm that this gentleman's developing, raising game birds, sport birds, quail and chuckers and pheasants. So you have a lot of these big ranches now that, will offer these hunting trips to guys, that want to go out and shoot quail and that kind of thing. Well, they can't naturally reproduce their flocks and have, hunters coming in during season, week after week after week, they harvest all the birds. So he's developed an industry to raise the birds to supply to these, farms or these ranches, that they can market to the sportsmen. And he's found some problems with the water quality that's cut his production back 25%. So we're actually in the middle of analyzing what's in his water and what's causing his birds to not have good survivability. And that's just kind of an interesting one. But yes, your organic birds and produce and farms have become a huge market for water treatment. And then one that, we might think about is certainly like the marijuana farms, that are being raised for their plant, and they require extremely high quality water to be able to maximize the production. And that's something 10 years ago, 15 years ago did not exist. It's a whole new industry.
Sure. Hey, Mike, talk a little bit about the actual technology, equipment, what kind of process that you're usually working with, what kinds of filtration, what kinds of conditioning, what kinds of applications?
Yeah, there's nothing really different about than what probably most people are already doing with their residential, commercial, industrial water treatment. I mean, we analyze the water. We are looking at probably some things maybe some people don't look at, like manganese, pesticides, insecticides a little more. But the treatment equipment we use is pretty much still standard treatment equipment, although a lot of these farms are higher volume. So we'll get into what I call mid to light commercial type sized equipment. You're not going to have a 10-inch filter, and you may. Some of these don't require that much water. So, standard residential equipment can work, or it could go the gambit to some of these operations where we require hundreds of gallons a minute. So it's sizing equipment, putting in equipment, utilizing equipment. I wouldn't say there's really anything, that far different than what somebody who's already doing a diverse type of water treatment would not be familiar with already.
I have to ask you what role you feel WQA has played in helping you serve this market, the agricultural market, and how has it helped through education, certification, and so forth?
Sure. WQA played a big part. As I already said, I kind of had a a little easier inroad into the market, into the industry based on my background. But even with that, it wasn't until, I started going through the old method of using the books and developing my certification to, becoming a CWS1 and working my way up to becoming a CWS6. And now, we call it a master water specialist. Once I started gaining those credentials, what it did is it allowed me to get into the veterinarians, the doctors, the people with PhDs that work within these industries. They started viewing me as someone reliable and reputable. Without having those designations, I really struggled getting in front of those people to have the bigger conversations. And so going through all of that certainly allowed me to, strengthen my science behind what we were doing, to understand the chemistry better behind what we were doing. But it did allow them to view me in a different way. I wasn't just Mike working for some company trying to sell them something. I was viewed more as an expert and more of a resource, but I needed both to be able to do that. But I've often said before that I would have never had the opportunities that I've been afforded over the years if it wasn't for carrying that certification, having that behind my name, and then, having the full force of WQA, and then getting to know people within the industry. People look to me as a go-to guy on a lot of things. I never thought I'd become one of those people, but I do get a lot of people, that say, hey, you're my go-to guy on water treatment. Well, I have go-to people too. That I've learned to meet through the industry. We don't all know everything about everything. And, you're allowed to meet and to network and to learn who these people are. And fortunately, our entire industry is so giving with their knowledge, with their expertise, that they're willing to help me out. So if I'm stumped on something, I've learned there are other experts out there that I can call or I can email and ask a question to. And if they don't know, they at least know where to send me to, be able to go ascertain that information. And those are all resources I would have never had if I hadn't gotten involved in WQA, going through the training, the certification, and become involved in the industry.
Really great to hear that, Mike. We appreciate that very, very much. And it makes sense. It makes perfect sense. If you're listening to this and you're not involved in WQA's professional certification program and training, this is the time to get involved. Listen to what Mike is talking about, and you get an idea of the value that it provides. So maybe we can wrap this up, Mike, with a kind of a two-part question. And that is, you mentioned how things are advancing in water for agriculture. Where do you see things going in the next 5 to 10 years? What are the biggest opportunities, and how can WQA and our members do more to reach that part of the market?
Well, that's a loaded question. I think the ag industry is continuing to evolve. It's continuing to get more sophisticated, like a lot of industries. And not unlike a lot of other industries, they face some of the same issues. How do we do more with less? And water, we all understand, becomes a more precious resource each and every day. So the ag industry is certainly they're a high consumption industry. If you got livestock, you feed a lot of water. If you're irrigating crops, you use a lot of water. So I see it's already started somewhat, but I see water reclamation, water reuse, water storage. I mean, a lot of these big barns have a lot of roof area. You can collect rainwater and store it, not just let it run off. And I've worked on a number of projects like that. And when you're doing that, that requires obviously water treatment to take care of that. So that industry, I see that continuing to be a very growing part. I know there's been some discussion within WQA, how do we learn about rainwater harvesting and how we treat that water and deal with that, as opposed to just pumping it out of the ground or pulling it out of a lake or a river. So I see that growing. I think that's an opportunity, to bring speakers in to WQA, start exploring what those options are and maybe how we deal with certainly some of that water, because we're not making any more of it. We move it around, and more of us want to get our hands on it more and more. And, here in Virginia, one of the biggest states for data centers, I mean, we're fighting those boys every day for the use of that water. So, and that's a big thing that I think a lot of us in a part of the country are going to be fighting. So again, it falls back. How can we be better stewards of the water we're working with? And so sustainability, recycling, reuse, all those things, and then the treatment that goes with it will certainly be, I think, a bigger item each and every year moving forward for the next number of years, for sure.
Well, Mike, this has been fascinating and very timely and very helpful. We appreciate your doing this for us and joining us on the podcast.
Absolutely. So when everybody's eating their turkey, think about the good quality water that went in to make that turkey. So just one shout out, if I may, I would be remiss. I am chairman of the membership committee this year for WQA. So if anybody's listening to the podcast and they're not members, I would certainly encourage you to consider becoming a member over this next year. We have some exciting new benefits coming for members next year. It's made the world a difference in my career, and it certainly can in yours. So if you're not involved, please consider getting involved. We need you. At one time, I thought, what can I do for the industry? How can I ever be, a resource to it? And here I am and doing a podcast. So, whether you have those types of desires or not, it will help your business. It will help your industry. So get involved, please.
And I'll just add to that, if you go to the website, wqa.org/membership, you'll get more information about how to join. So great plug.
Absolutely.
Great promotion. Thank you very much again, Mike. Mike Heatwole with Water-Right, A.O. Smith Corporation, Master Water Specialist, joining us here on the Water Quality Association podcast. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Wes.
And now our WQA tip. Did you know that you can book your hotel room for the upcoming WQA 2026 WQA Convention and Expo in Miami Beach? Now, registration will open at a later date, but hotel booking can be performed online now by going to wqa.org/convention. Convention dates April 28th through the 30th, 2026. Again, it's in Miami Beach, Florida. We look forward to seeing you there. Learn more at wqa.org/convention. Thanks for joining us for the Water Quality Association podcast. Learn more about water and water filtration at our consumer website, betterwatertoday.org. And learn more about professional certification, the Gold Seal Product Certification Program, and how you can become a member at WQA.org.